What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. We've been talking about Game Pass. I've been taking my time to go ahead and point out a lot of the concerns and some of the things that I think are missing whenever we talk about this whole Game Pass conversation. And today I wanted to go ahead and talk about the 100 million subscribers that Game Pass was targeting and has still not, achieved and may never achieve, and how that has not necessarily stopped Game Pass, nor has it affected Game Pass continuing to do what it is that it wants to do. Now, whenever you say, or whenever you talk about Game Pass and profitability, some people say, no, Game Pass is not profitable simply because, Microsoft aimed to have 100 million subscribers by a specific time frame. If not, they would have to move away from the business model. However, things seem to have changed, or at least the profitability target for Game Pass seems to stay steady for the most part. Now, that does not mean that, right now Game Pass is definitely going to be where it needs to be and everything is all fine and dandy. However, Game Pass is not in quotes trouble like many people, want to claim it to be, because the 100 million subscribers was Satya Nadella and, Phil Spencer shooting for the moon. And then the 34 million that they actually achieved was them basically landing on the rooftop of the highest building in their city. That's basically how I look at it. But let's go to the news. Let's go ahead and check out what the, journalists had been saying. Let's go ahead and look at how many subscribers Game Pass had as of the time, that the Activision acquisition was actually coming into the limelight. So first of all, a report revealed that somehow in 2021, Xbox saw a revenue of $2.9 billion from Game Pass alone. This number was one of the first official numbers that we got because apparently when the Brazilian Authoritative Council for Economic Defense, called CADE, when they were actually talking about their reports, they put that number out there at the time. That was where we first got our number of about 20-something million subscribers for Game Pass. Since then, that number has actually gone up. And many of you remember that this authority was one of the ones that approved the merger almost unanimously without any issues down there in Brazil. Another thing too about Game Pass and this conversation was Sony was also actively paying developers not to push their content to Game Pass, or at least they were actually making, kind of putting some agreements and some clauses in place that did not allow for the, developers to be flexible enough. So the conversation as to what was going on and going down at the time, we got to see a lot that actually came to light. Another really interesting piece of the whole puzzle was when Phil Spencer talked about how Xbox spent about $1 billion in acquiring content for Game Pass. So I do a simple mathematical, inference where I say, okay, if Xbox made $3 billion in 2021 and it didn't make a dime more, and Phil spends about $1 billion a year, Xbox is making somewhere around $2 billion in revenue after you remove the cost of acquisition of content. Whenever you come around and start looking at, say, infrastructure and overhead, I've always concluded that infrastructure and overhead is not necessarily that expensive or more expensive than what was already being supported with Xbox Live and the Microsoft Store. Game Pass is like the Microsoft Store. It literally is one interface that's being built, that's being supported in the exact same UI and the exact same user experience. If you look on the Game Pass library, you see all the games available to you. If you look at your library, you see all the games you own. If you look at the store, you look at all the games on the store. You can buy them here. You can even buy them from the Game Pass route. You can look at cloud gaming. So all of this stuff is already here and doesn't necessarily pose a significant extra cost for Xbox. So if you actually did 2 and 2 and you put the math together and you fired up a calculator and you say, okay, let's take $1 billion out of this $3 billion for acquisition of content, and let's take again, say, 0.5 out of this, Xbox is sitting somewhere around $1 billion or so in terms of profitability. Another source that kind of gives us a clue as to this $1 billion in terms of profitability is simply Sony's leaked data in the Insomniac unfortunate hack. Remember, in some of the slides, which I will not show on here, many of you can watch, you can go to journalists' websites. Some journalists wrote about it in, more, big, huge publications. Sony PlayStation said that Xbox had a $1.5 billion margin over them based on Game Pass and some of the other things that they had put in place. So that $1.5 billion citation that I'm putting here These are numbers that we've seen not only from the Brazilian authoritative, and defensive, whatever their, organization is. And it's also a number that's been cited from PlayStation themselves. Now, this tells you that Game Pass has this, propensity to continue as a service, to continue to change the industry. Is it going to reach the 100 million subscribers? I don't know. In fact, to be honest, I doubt it. However, anyone who's taking that 100 million to mean that Game Pass has not, basically been profitable or has failed as a proposition, they're not being honest, or they're not looking at the context that we're actually paying attention to. So there's all this stuff that you got to put into perspective when you're actually talking about Game Pass, and also seeing that, the subscriber base of Game Pass has also gone up. Then it's an entirely different conversation. Now, how about the Activision and the Bethesda acquisition? Yeah. How does that factor in to Game Pass overall? Does that not mean that Microsoft is in the hole for about another $90 billion? That's a very good question. Let's go ahead and pick up our shield, which are the facts that are available to us. Once upon a time in 2017, there were efforts by the administration in the United States to incentivize big corporations to bring in money from their offshore accounts. Microsoft, Apple were two of the companies that were in this particular category. In that year, Congress and the President of the United States put together a package called the TCJA that allowed for these organizations to get a tax cut or a break if they brought in money from overseas. Some companies took advantage of this, and it is basically speculated that Microsoft actually took advantage of this. In their 2017 annual report, some financial analysts say, and this is what the financial analysts are saying, that there was a particular line item that had a tax bill attached to it, and it was in the billions of dollars. So the estimate was that Microsoft may have brought in hundreds of billions of dollars to have had to pay that amount in taxes. In fact, look at this article from Bloomberg here. It says big tech $100 billion foreign profit hoard targeted by tax plan. So this is basically, in 2021, the new administration is also targeting that $100 billion foreign fund. In the past administration, what the president did at the time was he basically said, hey guys, I'll give you guys a tax break. The new administration is looking for a way to get that money into the country or make these companies pay taxes over them. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who've been paying attention to this whole conversation about Game Pass and Microsoft, I think the money that was used to acquire Activision Blizzard and also acquire Bethesda were these funds that were sitting in overseas that the companies did not want to bring in because the tax bill on them was so high. So they just basically let them sit. The moment they had the opportunity to bring these funds into the United States, I think they took that chance, brought them in, paid a very low tax bill on it, and had all that cash sitting around. This is basically, in my opinion, where some of the cash to acquire these two gaming conglomerates and even some of the other studios that Microsoft had been, picking up from time to time, via Xbox. I think that's where the cash comes in from. For those who continue to think, oh, Microsoft is in the hole, Microsoft's not going to be able to, in a sense, afford this stuff, you don't understand what you're saying. This is $1 trillion company. The money that they actually use to do this is basically play money for them. It's kind of almost insane to fathom it, that it's kind of play money. And I'm not saying it's play money, I say kind of, but it's hard to fathom it that it's kind of play money. And at the end of the day, what many people are going to be seeing is this is not going to stop. Xbox is going to continue to throw its weight around. And that's exactly what the industry is going to be responding to, the amount of money. Now, there's also the $29 billion tax bill that, Microsoft owes the IRS. But one thing about corporations is they have all kinds of laws that allow for them to be able to defer their taxes, to be able to basically use losses to offset them, and all kinds of magic that accountants do for them. So that $29 billion, I wouldn't even be worrying myself about it, because I guarantee you they have scholars in their accounting and legal departments that are going to help that $29 billion feel like pennies after they're done tweaking and shaking this whole thing all over the place. So when it comes down to this gaming thing, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very interesting thing that I think a lot of people missed out on. I saw this whole 2017 thing and I wondered exactly what it was, but Game Pass at the time was actually going, into effect. It was gaining wings. I thought that was the money that Microsoft was using to fund Game Pass. But going back to look at the tax bill and look at the financial statements, I think it makes more sense. And this is just me, basically doing my own investigations and hypothesizing, but with a strong theory that Microsoft basically had cash sitting around, and it made no sense that they would have to basically, be, on the ropes or in debt in terms of basically acquiring Activision and, Bethesda. Now, they could have borrowed the money, but usually these companies borrow the money and use the interest to offset, all kinds of different taxes and all kinds of different, profits that they make too. So to think that they don't have the money, I don't think that's a sound proposition. I think that's something that a lot of people are basically overlooking. I'm done with this video. Thanks so much for watching. Peace out.